Okay, welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer. So here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Do we tell everybody what just happened?
We had a pre-podcast discussion on which of these two movies we will talk about first. And I was like, oh, we'll talk about this one, end on a high note. And then you're like, end on a high note. So we already know that it's going to be a contentious podcast. We just can't have a movie that we both agree on recently, it seems like. But we've had a string of them. Anyway, we're going to talk about two movies tonight. We're going to talk about Destroyer and Vox Lux, both movies that came out in 2018 that neither one of us watched when they came out in the theaters, but we're catching up with now. So we'll start off with Destroyer. It's a movie starring Nicole Kidman, directed by Karen Kusama, and written by her husband, Phil Hay, and his writing partner, Matt Manfredel. And it's about a police detective who is trying to tie up some loose ends from a time when she was undercover 17 years before. That is one thing that both of these movies have in common. We'll get to it in Vox Lux too, but where they kind of have segments of the story that are told about 16, 17 years apart. So I thought that was kind of interesting because I watched them back to back, and I was like, I mean, I'm stretching to get a common thread between these two movies, but that is
I
it.
didn't even think about that until you just said that. I never even thought about it, but you're absolutely correct. They do. There is a jump. One movie jumps and another movie jumps back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, this one jumps back and forth.
Yeah, this movie does jump back and forth. We both talked about the Karen Kusama's previous film, The Invitation, a while back, and I thought that movie was really cool. I mean, it was interesting subject matter and very well shot, well acted. I thought I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. So I was interested to see how this movie played out. And Nicole Kidman, I mean, I'm in as far as Nicole Kidman is concerned. I'll see anything that she does. In fact, Steph is chomping at the bit for Big Little Lies to come back in June. She's seriously, she's I want that now. So, and I get it. It's a great show, and we've seen Nicole Kidman in a few movies. Even in Aquaman, she was great. I don't have any issues with her in there. So she's behind some prosthetic makeup type stuff in this one to make her look a lot more beaten down and older in the current day timeline. And I'll have to say that this movie did not do it for me. I had some serious issues with it. How did you like it?
I had no issues with it. I enjoyed it for what it was. I enjoyed her. But that goes without saying. It's not anything we haven't seen before. I mean, we have seen this story before. It does have a twist at the end, sort of, which I do have some questions about. But these type of movies, when they finally start rolling and you get in the middle of it and you realize it's sort of a revenge tale, or it's sort of a right things that have gone wrong, or I have been a bad person in the choices that I made and I need to right those make them right before I die or before the end of the movie, whichever happens first. Once you realize that's what you're getting, then it becomes about performances for me. And I think the performances are really great. I think she's great. I think Sebastian Stan is great. I think the daughter's great. And it's moody, and it's, I don't know why anybody would want to visit LA, by the way, because anybody in the rest of the country who sees these type of movies must think LA is a horrid place, because these movies just make it look horrendous. And I'm sure there's that side of it. All the way back to Chinatown, they make LA not look good. And it's interesting that such creative juices comes from that town, but it is a troubled town. We've seen bank robbing stories before. We've seen these stories where the cops are going to become something that you weren't expecting them to be. You've seen cops in movies become drug addicts because they go underground or undercover. There's a great movie with Jennifer Jason Leigh called Rush. Anyway, that movie is about actually an addiction problem based on going undercover. And so we've seen all of these things before. So once you kind of keyed into this is what this film is going to be about, I rolled with it, and I thought it was good. I it's interesting to me that we, as in you and I, have an instinct about films that we get a chance to see in the movie theater and don't get a chance to see. There was a, now that I look back on it, there was an instinct to not really worry about this film, with the exception of she got nominated, which they were talking about that.
For a Golden Globe.
But you said it when we talked about. Well, she was also slotted to be nominated for the Oscar too. There was a possibility that she would be nominated, and then of course we would have seen it because we try to see all the Oscar nominations when it comes to performance and that kind of stuff. But you said it during our Boy Erased episode. It's just like Nicole Kidman nomination. It just can happen every time because she's that superb in everything that she does. So the point to all that is that we had an instinct and we kind of bypassed this movie because it's it for people who haven't seen this type of movie before, I think they're going to think it's outrageously great. But I've seen all of this happen before, so I'm not overly enthused about it, but I think I liked it more than you did.
Well, I think my big question or my big problems are like I feel like style, like filmmaking style, goes a long way for me, and the performances, like that's kind of like a last ditch effort for me. Like if I have to cling on to performances only, then like I'll do it, but I don't really like it. I would much rather have dynamic filmmaking in front of me and performances that are, you know, bolstering the whole thing. I mean, it's great when a movie is great across the board, obviously, but at the same time, if you're just looking at like only the performances, I felt bad for some of the characters because, or some of the actors, because their characters weren't fleshed out very well. We've got a kind of like a, you know, kingpin mastermind of this group that she's infiltrated when she's younger, and her and Sebastian Stan, you know, her partner, are supposed to infiltrate this group. Silas is the leader, played by Toby Kebbell. He's supposed to be menacing, he's supposed to be dangerous, and I didn't feel like we got enough there. We didn't get enough scenes or enough situations where we're, you know, supposed to be that fearful of him. It just seemed like that was a little bit lacking. And then also the Sebastian Stan character, we're supposed to, you know, immediately assume that they're, you know, together. We did get one scene kind of closer to the end, like a dialogue scene between them that did help out a lot, but it just seemed like there was more time spent on things that, present day stuff that was just like, there was a lot of time spent on, we're following this car and this, you know, and we're following this other car, and it just seemed, I don't know, it just seemed very procedural, and there wasn't enough like dynamism to the storytelling, which is sad because I felt like there was, in The Invitation, it's such a contained story, and Karen Kusama was able to get this feeling of dread and this feeling of foreboding and just like let the audience stew in it. Whereas in this movie, I didn't feel like I was stewing in any dread or foreboding. And some of it has to do with the format of the film, bouncing back and forth and kind of like giving out a little bit of information to the audience a little bit at a time, and kind of, you know, telling you need to, you know, figure it out for yourself, which I'm fine with. But it just seemed like I was about 45 minutes, maybe an hour into the movie, and I was like, what am I supposed to be caring about right now? All I know is a guy with dots on the back of his neck is dead, and she's supposed to be doing something with, you know, a piece, you know, got sent a dollar bill that had a blast pack, you know, purple ink on it. And that's really all we know. Like about up to an hour in, you really start learning things when she captures Tatiana Maslany, who's in Orphan Black, which is a really cool show if you haven't seen it. It's like a Canadian show. They play it on BBC America.
Yeah, I know who she is. She's great.
Really good. Yeah. By the way, this movie is stacked with amazing character actors, like amazing actors. You got Scoot McNairy in there. I mean, I just finished watching True Detective, the 3rd season. He's in that. I mean, he's in everything. And Bradley Whitford, you know, from Get Out and West Wing. And I mean, he's in all kinds of stuff. So these are great these are great actors, but I just feel like their characters, leave a little bit. I don't know. They're lacking something, and maybe that's in the writing. I don't know, but I it was hard for me to hold on to it. And there's the last thing I guess I'll say about the the storytelling portion of this movie is that I watched Destroyer before I watched Vox Lux last night, and it was late at night, and I was starting to fall asleep during Destroyer, and I was able to rally and finish the movie. And then I turned right around and watched Vox Lux from like midnight to 2 o'clock, and I stayed up the whole time. So is that says something to me about the movie, the Destroyer, not being able to keep my attention, even with what it was trying to do to, like, figure out this puzzle. It just fell flat with me. We can get into very, the specific things at the end.
I see. Let me put it this way. I see what you're talking about. I completely agree with you on some level. But for me, I think what the director was trying to do was the texture of the city was supposed to be gritty and menacing, and her being up all night and her looking like she hasn't slept in 14 days and that kind of stuff. And I agree with what's the bad guy's name?
Silas, Toby Kebbell.
At first I was like, why is Chris Angel the villain? I was like, what's happening here? I was like, he's not very, he looks like Chris Angel all the way to the point.
Mind freak.
Right. Which I dig on some Chris Angel. I've watched that show. I think he's cool, but he does look like, with the black vest and the white shirt and the long 1980s Bono hair. And, I love all those people. Don't get me wrong. But until the scene that happens with him and her, and you see a couple of flashbacks where he goes, I know who you are. I know who you really are. That's menacing. And that I did like that, where the dialogue was spoken and unspoken. Like they were reading each other's mind at one point. You know what I'm talking about? That scene between her and Silas. Yeah. So I did like that. And I understand where the director, did not build on that for you. But for me, that kind of stuff is enough, because it's a bank robbery movie. And I think what's happening here is, my issue with Vox Lux, which we're going to get into, is that I don't understand what that movie is. Is it a character study? What's the narrative of that film? What are we supposed to take from that movie? What are we supposed to focus on? And I think you had that same problem with this, when this is a character study that's not as fleshed out for you as it is for me, but the narrative is very clear, albeit something we have seen pretty much a million times before. And if your discussion was, we've seen it a million times before, I'm bored with that, nothing new was brought to it, I could understand that a little bit more. But I think the texture was there, and I think that the menacing parts of her life were there. And what is the Petra, the character Petra, with her in that scene, uh, there is this forebodingness that's happening to Nicole Kidman's Aaron Bell, her character, that this is not going to end well. She actually says that. That's actually an acting thing when you're analyzing a script. You're supposed to look for things that the screenwriter or playwright write about you, and they can tell you qualities that you're supposed to exhibit and things that you're going to want as your intentions and that kind of stuff. And she says that none of that's going to end well for you. This is not going to go good for you. She says that to Petra at one point when she's locked up in her apartment. This is not good. This is not going to end well. This apartment, all this other stuff. And she says, you're rich. You come from a rich father. Why are you living like this? Obviously, she's a woman who's addicted to the bad boy syndrome and all that other stuff. I mean, it's kind of fill in your blanks. So all of that was gritty for me. And all of the fact that you found immediately that they were attracted to each other, Sebastian Stan, Chris, and Aaron, the two lead characters, immediately were attracted to each other. And that opening scene kind of reminded me of that thing that Tim Roth does in Reservoir Dogs, where he's reciting his dialogue until he gets it right. And then you see him actually reciting the dialogue. You don't see that in this movie, but they're going over their cover, their backstories and where they're from and where they met, what bar, and all this other stuff that's going to ingratiate them into this group of people who are bank robbers. And then when he says, I want you to kiss me, immediately that he's saying that. As an audience member, you're supposed to believe he's saying that because, they're supposed to be lovers
Mm-hmm.
undercover. So he wants to pretend like he's not going to be shocked by that if and when they cuss, if and when they kiss in public. But immediately when he says it to her that he really wants to kiss her.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows it too. And then she has to kind of like play it like, okay, yeah, you're right. So how was that? They're in love from that moment on. So when the stakes are very high from them from the moment they walk into that situation. And at any moment, especially the Russian roulette scene, at which we've seen a million times before, I'll give you that. But it does establish something between those two main characters that we need as an audience member. We know that they are in an uncontrollable situation. And you see Nicole Kidman looking at Sebastian Stan like, are we going to step in? Are you going to step in? What are we going to do? We can't let this guy kill himself right in front of us. And then the guy goes ahead and clicks the gun. And of course, he doesn't die. And he becomes a character later on. Well, he becomes a part of the plot later on. But in those moments there, I thought that that was menacing and I thought it was gritty. And I was not on the edge of my seat, but I definitely was perked up like, what's happening here? Unfortunately, I think what happens for you, which I was okay with, but from what I'm hearing you say, is that since nothing else happens that we haven't already seen before, you're kind of like, huh, okay, the guy didn't kill himself. There was only 3 bullets in the gun. What, what, what was this supposed to prove? For me, it was showing all of those cliche things that the lead guy is a sociopath who doesn't care, a psychopath who doesn't care about anybody. His people that are in his entourage, he doesn't care if they kill themselves. He has to act like he has the biggest dick in the room. He has to prove to the guy that, he's willing to play Russian roulette. I mean, we've seen it all before, but I did think it added atmosphere and I did think it added some kind of angst to it that obviously didn't wash
Yeah.
well for you. And I can respect
Yeah,
that.
I don't know. I guess maybe I had too high expectations after the invitation. Of course, the invitation also has, like I said, a more like a kind of an interesting kind of mystery slash hook to it. And I think I was also expecting a little bit more out of this. You're right. It's a bank heist movie. It's them trying to integrate into this, group to try to prevent them from stealing money and guns and all that stuff. And it's very rote. It's like an episode of a TV show as opposed to a feature length film. And I felt like the end was a little. We can start talking about the end. I think the end was a little. It was a little exploitative of the audience, where it's like, hey, we're building up to this big thing, and it's like, oh, I don't know. It just seemed like it seemed gimmicky. Also, it just seemed very. I didn't get that like what? I didn't get that Kaiser Soze. He starts walking away and loses the limp, feeling out of the end. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense.
And there's an inherent problem there because we are living in the you know Sixth Sense twist, and we're living in the Kaiser Sose twist world now that we've been so surprised by those two films in particular, that now a film like this needs to have some kind of twist ending to it. And in a way, it's kind of refreshing that it's like, oh, that's what happened. And then you backtrack it in your mind and you go, oh, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. The fact that it's not this big twist ending is good for me because I think we're wanting that too much. It's like you once said that DC is trying to do what MCU is doing with the humor, that now everything's got to
Mm-hmm.
be a quip. And actually, I was reading something on Facebook the other day. It might have been Twitter actually, because Twitter is, you think we're harsh? Oh my gosh, you got to go on to Twitter Fest, man. Woo, it's crazy. People are fierce, man. They are really, really aggressive. But they list the 13 reasons why, if you're over the MCU, it's okay to be, and you don't have to apologize. And one of them was, does everybody have to say Tony Stark quips now? It's like every character now has some kind of like but joke line, and that's just not how it is in the comics, which is not a necessarily a great argument because or discussion, because a comic's a comic, a movie's a movie, a play's a play, a book's a book. I've always been able to separate them. What you choose to do with your movie based on this character is what you choose to do with your movie based on that character. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same, but their main gripe was that everything has to have a joke attached to it now. Everything has to have some kind of social statement that ends in some kind of funny joke about the two characters standing in the middle of, Thanos trying to kill everybody. And so I get that. And I get that the twist endings that we're expecting in these movies. See, I wasn't expecting a twist ending to this movie. I wasn't expecting it to have a twist ending. And if it had been a big reveal and a bigger twist ending, then I would have been more disappointed with this film than I was. Not that I was that disappointed with it, but I'm glad it kind of was like, oh, spoiler, she's already gotten her revenge. The movie started with her completing her mission, and the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. I was like, that's clever. For me, that worked. I was like, and the three dots, the three black tattoos on everybody's neck, which is crazy because she obviously has hers removed. And I'm like, there's still three dots on the
Yeah.
back of your neck. They're just now three red scars. It's like, turn that into something. But it had to be there because you had to know she had that at one time and then had it removed. The fact that that was the simplicity of the reveal, and that that's the first thing that you see on this victim, and then you see them later on. And I guess to the credit of the screenwriter, you kind of forget about those three dots. And in a way, it becomes about her trying to revenge herself with what Silas has chosen to do, killing her lover and so forth and so on. I said spoilers. That you kind of forget to connect the dots, in finger quotes, but then the dots come back. And then you're like, oh, okay. See, to me, it was subtle and smooth and worked. So I don't know how. I feel like I'm trying to convince you into something, but that's not the point here. The point is that for me, I didn't want to turn it off. I wanted to keep watching it. I wanted to know. There was a point where I had to get up and go to the bathroom. I was watching it at my house on my computer. And a lot of times, really great movies, I'll ignore having to go to the bathroom because I don't want to stop watching it. A lot of the Netflix episode shows, I'm glad they're coming to an end so I can pause it because I can start another episode after I go to the bathroom, but I don't want to pause it in the middle of the episode because I'm so intrigued by it. This was somewhere in between for me. I could pause it and go to the bathroom, but I was hoping nothing distracted me getting back to it. I hope the phone didn't ring. I hope my father didn't need anything. I hope I didn't have to go downstairs and open the door, or get the mail, or any of that stuff because I wanted to get back to finding out what happened. Overall, it worked for me.
Do you think that the realization of the film was what the actors? I guess this is another question. I'm also watching Barry now. I'm all caught up on Barry, the HBO show with Bill Hader, and he plays an assassin who wants to be an actor instead of an assassin. And so he's in an acting class, and there's all these, actors and acting classes and all that stuff. But it makes me wonder. I was starting to think of things from the actor's standpoint, and especially something like this. Like, do you think that Nicole Kidman, is? I mean, I'm sure she's proud of her performance, but I wonder what would happen what does happen when actors sign on for something. And I'm not saying that these actors feel this way about this film, but it just opens up another question for me. When an actor signs on for something, goes through the whole process, and then finds out that it's not what they had expected, it just makes me. I mean, first of all, that's obviously first world problems to the nth degree because somebody started a movie and they made that movie, and people are seeing that movie. So I get it. It's not the worst problem for somebody to have, but it just makes me wonder from an actor's standpoint, like if you have been in any kind of productions where it started off where there were all these possibilities, and then it turns out that it was just kind of like a big goose egg as far as the production was concerned.
I have to say no because I've been really fortunate. I don't do it enough to have that kind of experience. Every time that I've done it, it turns into something spectacular and it turns into something bigger and better than I would have ever expected. I mean, you witnessed some of that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm always saying, wow, I never expected it to be all that.
Mm.
So I'm always pleasantly surprised and blown over by it. I have been in scenes, blown away, I guess is what I wanted to say. I have been in scenes and or in rehearsals with, and I've done this myself, where the actor that I'm working with is not on the same page as me. And that not necessarily I'm on the right page and he or she is on the wrong page. It's been both ways. And you can't find that connection. So you just wing it. You just hope for the best. And we talked about this the last play that I was in, that I actually think that if there is magic in this world, it is created through theater. And I mean, it's pure magic to look at like the kitchen of somebody in a penthouse in Manhattan. And then when you walk around the back of it, it's literally wood and angles and things and sandbags holding things down and paint dripping and muslin and glue. And it's completely fake. But then you walk back around and you're like, I am in a Manhattan apartment kitchen, high end, when I walk around this side. So there's magic in it. And for whatever reason, I've been fortunate to where if that ever happens to where this goose egg is happening, that the magic of the theater wipes it away on opening night. And then we click or we find something or the audience sees something or hears something that we don't. And their reaction. There was one scene in the last play I did in North Carolina, Perfect Arrangement, where I was supposed to walk on and I knew it was supposed to be a joke. And I could never figure out how to deliver the line because I couldn't understand the intention at the time. And I kept delivering it as like I was a stand-up comedy or comedic. And finally the director's like, don't tell people what the joke is. I mean, he literally said that to me. And I was like, yeah, I know I'm doing that. I can't help it. Like, what do I do? And he was like, just say the line, just don't even think about it. And that's what I did opening night. And people laughed. And I was like, okay, I'm good. And then they laughed at the next two lines too. And I was like, I'm good. So the audience can allow you to connect things that might not be working as well. That said, I think that a script like this gets greenlit because of the finger quote twist at the end. It's not only a great character study for Nicole Kidman, but the reason why people, well, that and the fact that Karen Kusama, not only did she make a couple of really interesting movies before this, The Invitation being one of them, but she did Girl Fight too, didn't she? Yeah, which I liked a lot, actually. I think that people entrust directors and screenwriters once they've seen their other work. I'm not sure she could have gotten this movie greenlit without the other movies, but I don't know how much of that, how that works anyway. But I actually think the whole idea for Nicole Kidman is probably a character study. This was probably a character she had never played before. It's Harvey Keitel, Bad Lieutenant meets, what's that movie with Keanu Reeves and
Point
Patrick
Break.
Swayze? Yeah, love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Utah, give me two. That's what this movie is. It's a bad cop looking for bank robbers or revenging something that happened during a bank robbing scenario. But the character is different than anything that I've seen her do. It's grittier, it's darker, although she's been in some strange things in a good way. So I think that's probably why she signed on to it. But I think the whole Silas twist at the end, for lack of a better term, is why other people were like, this is really well done, because I wasn't expecting that to be the person who we saw in the beginning. I wasn't expecting to have the murder already solved before the movie even started. Like I wasn't expecting it to be like that, because they give you the impression that she's going to solve this murder.
Mm-hmm.
And halfway through the film, I'm like, has she lost track of that guy who got killed? Or is he just a messenger? Like, what is his deal? That guy's coming back, but I kind of forgot about it. And I just assumed it was a message, like the $100 bill with the purple dye on it was a message. And she mentions that kind of stuff. So I don't think anybody involved, they might be disappointed with the way people respond to this, but I don't know. I think as an actor, you probably can't hold any weight to what happens after the filming is done because it's not in your control. You've done what you've chosen to do and that's it. So that's the only perspective I can see it from.
Mm.
Like, sure, it's probably, disappointing that people, it doesn't catch fire or people didn't like it as much as you thought they were going to like it, but I don't think they look at it as a goose egg. I understand what you're saying though, because I understand how you would look at it like that. Like, it's like wah wah wah.
Yeah, it was more like a thought exercise for me, just thinking of it like and Nicole Kidman, I'm sure she, enjoys her performance in this and, probably loves all that. And that's fine with me, but it just made me think about like, because this is definitely a movie that is hung on her, and I think that the issues I have with it are not necessarily her. It's really the writing and the lack of visual dynamics that.
Well, I will say this and then we can move on to the next movie. It's nice to see a movie with a female lead that's not important at all. It's not important that she's female. It's not prominent for the movie. It's not a thing. They don't make it about that. They don't really even add any kind of like she doesn't challenge people in the film who underestimate her because she's female.
Yeah.
They underestimate her because they don't realize she's a badass and like she is done. I will say this. My semi cynical Josh side does always wonder in movies like this. Okay, you're obviously burnt out. You're obviously was a drug addict. You're obviously your life didn't go well. You're not sleeping well. You look ragged. There is a side note to that all these beautiful women take all of this time to keep themselves looking really good in Hollywood, and then they make her look like this. That's kind of funny and ironic. But that's, probably what the actor wants.
Mm-hmm.
But always in these movies, these really bad cops or these really burnout cops, they all of a sudden just can get up and run and chase somebody down the street. She has a little bit of a harder time in this movie in that one scene where they're going up the stairs.
Yeah.
But why is it always cops are able to just be like, I'm no longer high on heroin. Let me run down 20 blocks to catch this guy. Every one of these movies, there's that.
Yeah.
And so, to end on a kind of semi-cynical note, there is that side of these movies that don't really make sense to me. But it was nice to see a lead character who's female, and it didn't matter one bit. She was as serious a character as any male in this part would be. And 20 years ago, this would be a guy.
Oh,
You know?
yeah.
It's great that it's a female, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, but the character itself is, I mean, it's necessary for her character to be a female because she has the extra added complexity of being pregnant with Sebastian Stan's kid and having to get out and all of that and having to deal with the rest of her life as someone who's having to go through that. She's not able to live the life that she wants. Afterwards she has to just stay on the police force and then become a detective. She decides to not be the mother to her daughter. She has to pick up a Scoot McNairy and get him to get with her very quickly so that she can think that he's
she says your father, and he goes, that's not my father. What's his name's my father. Whatever Scoot's character's name is. But I would beg to differ. I think this is no different than a cop finding out the girl he's undercover with is pregnant with his kid, and he has to venture out there and do the same thing that she has to do, albeit not pregnant, but still the woman that he's with is in jeopardy just like he is,
Mm-hmm.
and now the baby's in jeopardy too. And it's no different than the male cop having to, for lack of a better term, pawn the baby off on the mother. The only difference is that Nicole Kidman had to her off onto
Another guy.
um, a guy. It's really kind of no different. It layers it no deeper for me than we've seen a million times with it being a bad male cop. Now
Mm.
it's going to bug me. What is, oh, Ethan. Ethan is Scoots McNeary's character's name. So I just think that's fascinating that we are hopefully progressing in a day and age where it's not as relevant. And I might be completely wrong. It might be completely relevant to the filmmaker and the screenwriters that she's a female. But for me, I was just like, didn't think twice. I mean, her being pregnant and finding out she's pregnant is no different than, I think we've even seen it in a movie somewhere down the line where the two cops are in jeopardy and the female cop turns and whispers to the male cop, "I'm pregnant." And then the jeopardy is even higher at that point. We've seen that before. So the pregnancy scene where you see her go into the bathroom, in the public bathroom, and finding the pregnancy test is the same scene. It's just she's the actual one who's having the baby. So
Mhm.
anyway, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to Vox Lux, which is a movie written and directed by actor Brady Corbett. I have not seen any of his movies. Have you seen any of his movies? He's been an actor in a bunch of
Um,
movies, but I mean, I've seen him in movies, but I haven't seen the other movie, the other feature length movie he did was called The Childhood of a Leader back in 2015.
no, but I want to.
Yeah,
That movie looks really interesting.
yeah, I know. It's a little crazy, but so he's like I said, actor turned director, and he was able to get a bunch of like big people on board for this film. The the number one most notable person would be Natalie Portman, who co-produced and starred in the movie. I believe Jude Law was also a producer on it too. But this movie is about a girl who is a part of a school shooting and is injured and writes a song about it and performs it at a memorial, and the song kind of goes viral back in 2000, and she becomes a pop star. It's kind of split like the previous movie into two different sections, two main sections. You've got the section when she's younger and she's coming up as a star, and then a later section where she's grown up, older, played by Natalie Portman, and has a daughter who happens to be played. Her daughter happens to be played by the same actress who plays her as a young person, which I thought was kind of a cool. That was kind of a cool idea. I mean, that's I've not seen that done before. I don't even know if that's been done before, but that was kind of neat. I don't know. I liked this movie better than I liked Destroyer, but it's definitely not, on my, top 10 list of movies that came out in 2018. But I think I could see a little bit more what Brady Corbett was trying to do with this film. The beginning scene was disturbing, and I mean, as it should be. It is a school shooting. I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of time that leads up to the school shooting and then the actual school shooting, and it is abrupt and shocking and sad. And I thought that the credit sequence was really interesting because he's got some balls on him. He did all of the credits for the whole movie at the beginning of the movie, which I haven't seen in a long time. I mean, I know that's how they used to be back in, the olden days, where they would just have all the credits at the beginning and then the movie ends and it just says the end and you're done. But not anymore. That's not how it's done anymore. But he was able to make it visually interesting. I thought that the shots that they used, it's all the ambulances racing to the hospital with all of the kids that were injured, and it's got that kind of like Ronin Ronin feel where the camera is mounted on the front of a vehicle, and it's a wide angle lens, and it's kind of like moving in and out of the ambulances, and every once in a while there's kind of like a whip pan that happens. It was really interesting, and it made the credit sequence visually engaging, which is definitely I definitely appreciate that because credit sequences can be boring, but this one I thought was great. And then it kind of got us into the next part of the story. But what do you want to say about it? Like right off the bat, like I'm guessing, do you have all problems with this or are you?
No, I agree with what you said about the opening. I thought that was stunning. I thought it was interesting. I didn't necessarily dislike this movie. I just don't understand this movie. I mentioned when we're talking about Destroyer that that's a pretty,
Paint by numbers?
yeah, you could say that. Yeah, it's a well-known narrative. Revenge story, bank robbing story. What is this? Is this a character study? And let me just say this first. The last play that I just did is based on a 19th century Russian drama called The Seagull. And Chekhov, the gentleman who wrote it, did a lot of interesting things for that time. Instead of making solid narratives, he did character studies. And the reason why people were grouped together and you are meeting each other in a scene is to learn things about the characters. So I'm all about linear narratives. I'm all about obscure narratives. I'm all about just character study. I don't care if it's 7 characters just self-indulgent, but they say and do things in their character studies that mean something to me as a person. I will learn something as an artist. I will learn something as an audience member. I'm not saying it needs a definitive narrative, but this movie starts off as if there's going to be a definitive narrative. And then it just goes all over the place. So I'm saying to you, if it was just a character study, I'm fine with it. Is this just about a pop star whose claim to fame was launched because of a shooting? It just seemed like the shooting meant more than it evolved into later on. So we've jumped into something major. But for me, I could not figure out, what am I supposed to be taking from this movie? Am I supposed to just be watching what happens to a 14-year-old girl when she becomes famous, which we've seen before? Um, am I supposed to be following the fact that this is ramifications from a school shooting? Um, and then, yeah, I, I, I just don't know what the screenwriter and director wants from me. What am I supposed to cling on to here?
Well, okay.
I will say this: I love the hell out of Natalie Portman, and I love the hell out of
Raf B. Cassidy.
oh my gosh, yes, uh, the Killing of a Sacred
Yeah.
Deer, and I love the fact that she plays her mother later on, or her own daughter later on. I like that, and she wears brown contacts when she's Natalie Portman as a young person, and then her regular blue eyes when she's her child. And and they kept the same sister. She plays her in the beginning and at the end. I That was not confusing to me at all. I thought it was brilliant. I had no problems with that leap of faith. But tell me what I'm missing.
Okay. I think that I think there's a lot of statements that are being made in this film by Brady Corbett. I think one of them would be that this girl has gone through a traumatic experience and she didn't feel like she could. I reserve the right. I'm going to pause here and say I reserve the right to revise these answers because of what is said, like at the very, very end. But as I was watching the movie, this is what I was experiencing. This girl has gone through a huge trauma, and she does not have the ability to display her sadness and her trauma in written words or in spoken words. So she comes up with a song, or she is able to express herself through that song. And that song is that wrapped up song. And she purposefully says, like, I a lot in the song. But then the narrator, played by Willem Dafoe, says that that song was co opted to a certain extent and the lyrics were changed to we, and the song became an anthem for this particular tragedy and possibly other tragedies that would have happened, similar tragedies or even other tragedies that would happen, after she initially performs that. And it shows, what I was getting out of it was you could see how other people may want to include themselves in your sorrow, or they wanted to include themselves in her sorrow. Her sorrow was unique. She was someone who was in that room who knew that person who killed all of her friends and had to go through those things herself. But other people were like, yeah, we get it. Like we heard your song and we understand. We experienced that with you, because they might have felt like they experienced that, with, like I saw the, what happened on September 11th. That doesn't mean I experienced the same thing that someone who had a family member in those towers did on that day. And I don't even, I can't even fathom what that would feel like. But in this kind of like anthem type, mentality, people might think that, that they're experiencing that same kind of sorrow in the same way that she is. But so that's one thing, I think. Number two is how the entertainment industry is able to glom onto a situation and exploit it and wring it out of as much juice as they can. Strike while the iron's hot. You need to, not only do you need to have this one song, you need to have other songs. And not only do you need to have multiple songs, you need to do a video. And you need to do this video that seems incongruous with what's going on in your life at the time. I mean, she's in the movie purposefully, she's wearing this thing around her neck that is either number one, it does a couple things. Number one, it covers up her scars that she had from her injury, from her shooting injury. And number two, it always reminds everyone who sees her that she went through that trauma. So it's a constant reminder that she went through that. So I think and that's also used by the people who are in charge, her manager and the whatever the record executive publicist, I guess, person played by Jennifer Haley. I don't know how to say her name, but that's like Steph's favorite person because she was Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice a long time ago. So shout out to Pride and Prejudice from the mid-90s. But all of those people are taking advantage to some extent, or milking the capabilities of star power that this girl has at the moment that she has it. And that's what we see at the beginning of the film. What happens at the end of the film, or the second half of the film with Natalie Portman, I mean, that's different stuff. But initially, I think that's a couple of the things that I got from the movie.
I got that too, but what particular scenes of the young girls going and recording the song and running around Europe on their own, and the scene where Jude Law comes to the door and says they listen to your record and you got 2 hits, they think. She doesn't seem too surprised about that or too, overzealous about that. He says something. What scene in there shows me what you just said? Shows me that the world clings on to something and wants to, because I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that somebody wants to relate to something that they weren't there to experience firsthand. That's what music is. That's what art is. I have a buddy whose uncle died, a firefighter in 9/11. I have no idea what he's going through. I have no idea what his family's going through. But at the same time, it connects me somehow deeper to it because I do know somebody who knows somebody, even though that sounds silly, but
it's not because you listened to a song that somebody sang about it.
But why is that? You're saying it almost as, I don't want to sound accusational, but you're saying it as if that's a bad thing. Why is that a bad thing? And it doesn't seem like the kids are being exploited. To me, it doesn't. It doesn't seem, you don't see a scene talking to the manager and the publicist, and it says Josie the publicist, by the way, is the character's name. You don't see them going, yeah, don't let them know about this, or don't let them know, oh, the music business is this, the music business is that. Are we just supposed to now know that these cliches exist and that we know that these girls are being taken advantage of to a degree? It seemed like they were happy and that they were just going with the flow and that they didn't really even know what they wanted. And actually, it seemed to be, other than what Willem Dafoe says, the I was changed to we, but why is that necessarily a bad thing? It's a personal experience that she decided to. So where's the scene where she goes, oh, well, that was just a song I sang at the memorial. I can't sing that for other people. That's for me. That's to make me feel better. How you can't have that part of me. There's no scene like that.
Well,
It
and that's
just
because
seems
of what
to.
happens at the end, or because of what you find out at the end, supposedly. I'm still I'm still back and forth on the very end. The last thing that Willem Dafoe says in the movie.
You're gonna have to refresh my memory once we get there because
Sure.
I'm not following that lead. But do you understand what I'm saying? I hear what you're saying. I could say yes. I could see how you interpreted it that way, but there's nothing in the film that leads us down that particular road specifically.
Yeah, but you're looking for like a particular line or a particular you're looking for more of a paint by numbers type situation, whereas I don't think that this movie is anything like a paint by numbers type of a thing. It's more about it's looking another level deeper.
You have to be careful though, because you're making that sound like that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying paint by number. I'm saying you can tell the story that you want to see, but there are indications and clues, even in the most avant garde things, that allow an audience member to know that this is where the narrative is going, or this is where the storyline is going, or this is where the character is going. It's not necessarily, hey, Paul, you ignorant puss who's watching this movie, this is what you need to know. It's not that. It's that it's almost so sterile in the beginning that there is nothing that is in the film that could justify what you just said other than that's what you took from it. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying I could have seen that too, and I saw some of that. I thought to myself, well, it's kind of weird that two young girls are chaperoning each other, because the older sister's not that much older. Um, Old enough, but not that much older. And there is no supervision. And when that young man comes to her room later on, which turns out to be a really sweet scene, and actually, she says more about her character in that one scene than we learn about anything else from her. And there is an essence of what you're talking about in that scene. So it's not like it's not there. And I'm not saying that they have to, hit me over the head with it, but I still don't see a scene that is justifying what you're saying. That I see your interpretation of what the scenes were, but the scenes could
Mm-hmm.
be interpreted a lot of different ways. Like, was she being nonchalant about having two hits because she knew it was good enough to have two hits? Like, you can interpret it 1,000 different ways. And all I'm saying is a bit more influenced by the storyteller to let us know what the narrative is supposed to be. Because what is the narrative?
I think the biggest incongruity in this movie is how her character changes from the first part of the movie to the second part of the movie where Natalie Portman is they're two totally different characters. Doesn't mean they're not the same person who's been affected by the industry that she's been working in and by the life that she's led over the last 15 years or however many years are between that 17 years in between those two moments, those two instances. But I, and I think that may be a statement too. That it did take me a while to get used to the, how she's kind of like, yeah, whatever happens, I'm gonna go do this video. Not a big deal. I'm gonna dance around and I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be fine and we'll deal with it. And then she's just like fed up from the beginning with everything and everybody. Once you see Natalie Portman on screen, she's just done and she has no patience for anybody and she's having to deal with all these things. She feels like she's being put upon. She has the weight of all of these people on her, and yet she has people around her who are supporting her in different ways. And so you kind of get to see that whole situation, that whole, entertainer and all of the, little parasites on the outside of the entertainer and how they interact. Not necessarily calling like her sister a parasite, but you get to see that different dynamic, how she's being an established artist versus an artist who's up and coming. So I yeah, that took me a little while to get used to.
But when you come to the Natalie Portman scenes when she's grown up, and then it becomes extremely paint by numbers. She's an alcoholic. She's a drug addict. She's a pop star who is over being dealing with the paparazzi. She goes to the diner and secretly asks for a glass of wine in a styrofoam cup so she can mysteriously drink it out of the side of her mouth, which is really odd. And it's kind of unnerving how Natalie Portman plays all that stuff. I'm not sure I even understood her choices
Mm.
as an actress. And I love her. Don't get me wrong. I'm thinking I'm not understanding what they meant for this film to be. I'm not saying the film didn't do it. I'm saying it didn't come across to me the way what I took from it. I wasn't sure what to take from it. And then, the guy comes over and you see the scene where he interrupts their lunch and she explodes on him. We've seen it a million times before.
He doesn't seem like a real actor.
No, I didn't understand. Yeah, I didn't like that at all. I didn't.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, you're the one who got upset with me. No, actually, she was pretty respectful when she was like, not at this time.
Yeah.
So like it was very forced. But I think the reason why it's so forced at that point is because, and maybe this is a compliment to what you were just saying, is that everything is so non-direct up to this point that when it becomes very cliche and very direct, it's almost unsettling. It's off-putting. And you're right. It just was, there was no justification for him to say what he had to say. There was no, she was like, blah, blah, blah. He was like, call the cops. I was like, call the cops? What for? She didn't throw nothing. She didn't, like, do anything. She didn't throw her panties at you. I mean, I've heard of really obnoxious things being thrown at people from rock stars. So what did she do that was so like, call the cops? It was forced and pushed. And from that point on, everything that happens to the Natalie Portman character is just one cliche about pop stardom after the next. I mean, all the way to the drug scene with Jude Law. It's like, so what are we supposed to take from it? What's the point? That success has ruined this nice girl? The only thing that happens, and I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, and I'm perfectly okay with that because I'm aware of who I am. The right to contradict myself is something I hold dear. The only philosophy or theme or note that I took from it is when she's having the discussion with her sister. You're turning my daughter against me, blah, 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 blah. Well, you better be careful because I'm going to tell everybody that I write your songs and I do all of this for you and blah, blah, blah. And Natalie Portman goes, do you know what world we live in? No one's going to care. It's going to make me even bigger. I thought, oh, okay, that's poignant. That's something I've never really seen before because that's the society we live in now. We live in the Real Housewife society. We live in the real world TV show society. We live in the Survivor society where reality TV is part of that. So when somebody gets a divorce or somebody's bisexual or somebody's husband slept with somebody else's husband and somebody's sister slept with somebody, everybody's like, okay, more, even better. Those people, that dance mom woman who just got out of jail, it's like harassing and verbally abusive to little girls on the dance floor, and she becomes a big star. So I'm not indicting our society. That's not what I'm saying. It's not for me to stand on my soapbox and tell the world how they're supposed to act. I just don't watch any of that stuff. It doesn't appeal to me. That doesn't make me better or worse than anybody who does. Have at it, because I watch some odd stuff too. So I don't want somebody telling me, well, you can't really watch that because that's not sophisticated enough for your artistic sensibility, which I kind of have had somebody tell me something like that before. But anyway, the point to all that is that we're in a place where something like finding out somebody is not as credible as they are actually will make them more popular is an indictment to our society that I thought was a philosophy of the film that they could have clinged on to, that they could have wrapped a narrative around that would have made me more engaged. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I think that that scene also shows you the difference in how the Natalie Portman character, how Celeste is able to handle. I mean, at least to a certain extent. I mean, she's able to handle the pressures of being the front and center performer, whereas the Eleanor character, it's played by Stacey Martin. You get the feeling that she would not be able to handle that. She's a more like meek character, more kind of like withdrawn person, even if she does have the talent to create the songs or the lyrics or whatever, the whole thing, she may not be able to be that front facing person that people want in a pop star. So they do have somewhat of a symbiotic relationship. You know, the Celeste character needs Eleanor, and Eleanor may need Celeste.
Well, what they have is a abused relationship because
Mm,
Natalie Portman is verbally horrible to her. You know, she
yeah,
calls her
she
swine
is.
and backs her back down. So obviously that relationship is based on, you don't scare me. You think you're going to scare me? You're a swine. You're a punk. All that thing that she says to her,
Mm,
she's very abusive. And obviously Eleanor can't handle that side of their
yeah.
relationship. So even if Eleanor had the talent to stand up and say, these are my songs, let me sing them, or had the capabilities of doing it, it wouldn't matter because that relationship was established years ago that Natalie Portman was like, you stay in this hotel room or I'm going to beat you when I get back if you don't write me another song.
Well, it was established probably at the point where she found out that Eleanor was had slept with Jude Law, with her
Yes.
manager. And at
Yes.
that point, it was probably like switch flipped. This needs to, you know, he was supposed to want to sleep with me because I'm the, you know, even though she was what, 15 years old or something, it probably didn't matter to her, you know, mentally because she was supposed to be the star, and now the manager is sleeping with her sister, and it's got to be, I'm sure. Well, you could tell her demeanor totally changed when she saw that, but and it happened to be on September 11th when.
And that actually that's very well done. How she opens the curtains to the hotel room. And you're exactly right. Because what's going to happen from that point on is that Celeste is going to be like, you remember on 9/11 when we were worried about mom and dad? You were sleeping with the manager. So that's probably where the abuse began. You're probably exactly right.
Yeah.
I did like how that was handled. I did like how, you know, she throws the curtains open and she was like a plane hit a building in Manhattan and that's it. And the scene cuts right then and there. That was
Mm-hmm.
well executed because you got the information that you needed, you understood what was happening, and you could move on. And the one particular scene that we're talking about that has lit me up is one scene out of this whole movie that could have connected everything else. But name another scene that really connects to that. There isn't any because they're
Mm.
all disconnected. And it, as an actor by hobby, as an actor questioning the craft and trying to understand the craft, meaning myself, individual scenes in this movie are exquisite. The Christopher Abbott scene, the journalist scene, very well done. He is just superb. He's in a small little snippet of the movie, but he just holds his own. And if you think about it, if you were to listen to the dialogue that he has and then imagine it written down, that's really hard to do because he really doesn't have full sentences. He's like, that's not what I, no, you're taking it out. And he doesn't really, when you're looking at
Mm.
on a script, you know, dot, 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 that's not what I meant, dot, 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 comma, what? Like, you have to figure out the rhythm of what you want to say, even though you don't get it's very complex. At least for me, it is. He probably does it like it's secondhand. That guy is one to watch out for. He's been working nonstop ever since I saw him in Girls, but he is something to watch out for. He was in
It comes at night.
yes, he's good in that too. But he was in Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and if and when you ever get a chance to watch that movie, which you probably won't, but if it ever comes on, watch it for him because it will take you 15 minutes to recognize that's who it is. And then you're like, that guy can do that too? What is happening? He's very good. But the point to that whole thing was to get a shout out to Christopher Abbott because he's amazing. But that scene is amazing. But then in the middle of that scene comes the same cliche stuff that we've seen a million times before. So the whole point about talking about Christopher Abbott is to say that that scene, how does that scene connect to anything else in the film? Is it supposed to just show us that this is a character study, that the narrative is nonlinear, which is fine, that this is just a character study about a pop star? But when you have somebody who's so entrenched in a character, like Nicole Kidman was in Destroyer and like Natalie Portman is in Vox Lux, then you want something. I want something other than that. If it is just a character study, then I'm fine with it. But then we need to know why she wears silver hair and why she does the things that she does to make her look the way that she looks. And then we need to know why she's so agitated with the the paparazzi all the time. Is it just because she's over it and she's had years of it? What is it? Like, does she do and say things that she's not supposed to? Because they turn that scene into, which I thought was kind of interesting actually, when Josie, the publicist, comes in. They turn that scene into the journalist did something wrong when obviously he did nothing wrong. He was asking her pointed question, which journalists do all the time. And it can't be the first time that something about the accident or the school shooting has come up. Obviously, she's built a whole career over it. So I did like the idea that they immediately got defensive and attacked him and turned it around on, I'll shut this down and all this other stuff. But I come back to the same point. What in that scene connects to the rest of the movie? And what in that scene is anything new for this character? Not necessarily for the character in the movie, but a character like this. We've seen these. We just, Freddie Mercury does not as crazy of a job, but it's actually when you see the scene in real life, the actual YouTube footage of Freddie Mercury taking that guy down who says something about how come you don't get your teeth fixed. He actually, the way that he's portrayed in the movie is exactly how he acts in real life. And so we've seen that scene. It happens in the Doors movie. It happens in the Johnny Cash movie. I mean, it happens in every one of these movies. So this is a movie about a fictitious pop star. So you can do anything you want. And I don't care that they did this. It's fine. I get why this scene is in a movie, but why is this scene in this movie? Does that make sense? Like what makes it important for the subject or the narrative or us as an audience member to see this same scene that we've seen a million times before? What's the point?
I think the main point of that scene is exposition, is teaching or telling the audience about the wreck that happened that she was at fault for, because that's really what they didn't want the reporters to talk about, but what he specifically starts going after. So I think that's one main reason why they added that in there, and then also to see how she kind of just blows up at that reporter for asking a question that she didn't want asked. But ultimately what it comes down to is that she's a public figure. If she wants to make herself available, and if she wants to utilize the power of publications and websites and all these things, then she has to take on the responsibility of fielding questions that she might not want to answer. So that may also be, I don't know. I mean, it's probably trying to talk about journalism in general versus tabloid journalism, or journalism in general versus the paparazzi who are outside, who we never really see. You never really see the people who are taking pictures of her, but we do get to see, and she interacts, with the Christopher Abbott character, who is, I guess, a more established journalist than just like people trying to get a picture of her while she's eating food or drinking wine out of a cup with a straw. As the movie went on, it became less and less, to me, became less and less dynamic and less interesting. And especially by the end, the last scene where she does her concert, I wasn't sure how that was adding to the character itself. I feel like you get a very small amount of I didn't feel like this movie was supposed to be about a character who about the performances of the character that we're seeing throughout the movie. I thought that it was more about the behind the scenes type stuff going on than the on the stage type stuff, which it felt like there was 15 minutes of her concert, but maybe there was less. I don't know. But
No, it's like 3 or 4 songs, and
yeah.
I can
And
respect that.
I know Sia wrote all the songs. I get that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're good songs. They're fine.
I actually kind of like that for one reason. A lot of people criticized Bohemian Rhapsody for a lot of things, and some of it I think is justifiable. But a lot of people were like, do we have to see the whole Wembley concert at the end? Well, they did 3 songs. And I thought that was kind of nice because usually in these rock biopics, you see half of a song and then, you see the real person singing the song for the credits. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually nice to see Celeste singing her music and doing her show. I get that. But my question about that is I thought once you saw her performance, that would justify anything you've seen up to that point. The way she acts, the way she berates, the way she abuses, the way she twists her daughter's love, the way she does everything with Jude Law. I thought it was going to justify, not that somebody's talent should justify them being a jackass, but you can kind of excuse their human behavior if their talent rises above it. I'm not saying you should, but you kind of can because as an audience member, that's all we know. If we were to go to a concert of Celeste to see the Vox Lux album being played for the first time, we would that's what we would know. We would know Celeste in these junkets, these family situations. We don't know her that way. But when I was watching the performance, I thought to myself, is the director and screenwriter
The
same
same
person
person.
actually? Yeah, I just realized that. It's two different jobs, so we can give enough respect to say the director and the screenwriter as if they're two separate people because it's two different jobs. But anyway, did they purposely not make her look that great? Because I didn't think that she showed any kind of like amazing ability as a pop star that would make me go, I'm blown away by her selling out 30,000 people. But was that a statement from the director and the screenwriter, same person, saying that it doesn't take uber talent to become popular? It just takes a hook, or it just takes an I in a song. Does it just takes, I mean, some people criticize Kiss as being musically um devoid of any substance, but yet they're still touring, even though they're supposedly ending this last tour, the End of the Road tour, which I'm gonna say because I love them. But is it just pomp and circumstance? Is it just hype and glory? Is it just showmanship over substance? Is that what he was trying to show? Because I thought Natalie Portman looked a little awkward and a little strange, and it didn't look polished and it didn't look real. It didn't. And she's a trained dancer, isn't she? Wasn't she a
Uh,
trained?
I don't know if she's a trained dancer, but she did do training with her soon to be husband at the time on Black Swan. So she did learn how to do how to, how to do ballet. She did learn how to ballet dance or do some kind of ballet moves during that. But I got that feeling from her and also from Raffi Cassidy when she was trying, doing her kind of like walkthroughs of that. And so I don't know. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel that or not. I don't know enough about dance to know if like that's good or that's bad, but it didn't seem like neither one of them seemed like they were really vibing with what they were supposed to be doing. They did seem kind of like set apart from what was happening. But the main thing I got from the end, and like I said, I could have gotten it in a couple minutes, I guess. But the main thing I got from the end is that all of this stuff is leading up to this concert, and at this concert, she is front and center. Celeste is front and center, and she is providing a service to all of the people out in the audience, and she's giving of herself the maximum amount that she can to please them. And because of that, her life, because of that, she needs people to feed her. She needs people to give to her, feed into her, and that's what the shots you kind of get of her sister and her daughter in the crowd who kind of like transitioned from just kind of like blank stares to really starting to enjoy it and starting to see what she's doing to all the crowd around her. You get to see that kind of a switch happen, I guess. And it's not healthy how she deals with her family, how she deals with her sister and her daughter, but they provide, like, they must provide some sort of a service to her that allows her to build herself up enough to perform to all these people. So maybe Brady Corbett's trying to make a statement about like something's got to give, and for someone to put themselves out like that, certain people may need to be super crazy abusive to their family, and that's the mentality of pop stars, and that's what they can get away with, I guess, in a lot of ways, because of our culture's value on fame. Not value on talent necessarily, but value on fame. Because you really don't need to be talented to be famous, especially nowadays. So you can just be famous because you're famous.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fact that I don't know, or I don't have my own sense of what I took from this film, is an issue for me. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that it was the director or the same person, screenwriter, um, Brady Corbett. I'm not saying it was his issue per se, that he didn't present that for me to figure out. I'm saying, what did I not see in this film that has left me with all these questions? I'm saying that maybe in 5 years I can watch this movie again and I'll be in a completely different place and I go, oh, that connects to that. That connects to that. I get that. I get this. I get that. But hearing you talk about the fact that maybe this is a justification for why she is allowed to get away with what she gets away with because she is famous, that point was never made clear for me to go, oh, I can see why you're saying that because of this scene in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, I justify this because this scene in the movie, this is how this resonated for me. Like, what the hell was the scene where they decide to stop and go pray on the beach? Like, what the hell was that? Why was that? Was that because she was, what was that? Why was that in the film? And I'm not saying it didn't need to be in the film. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been in the film. For me, I didn't understand what I was supposed to take from that to understand the rest of the movie. Like I said, the only thing that made me go ding 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 and it just rang so true is when she was like, "Go ahead." It won't matter a bit, because you're absolutely right. In the society we live in now, infamous is more important than talent. Being famous is more important than talent. Now, staying famous might take talent, or might take ingenuity or perseverance or really hard work, how to evolve into something past whatever the reason is you became famous to begin with. But I was getting the impression from the film that she was a legitimate singer, even though the sister's like, my voice is better than yours, or she says her voice is better than her. It doesn't matter. It's like June Carter Cash says that about her sister too. Her sister was like, I think almost an opera singer or something like that. But June Carter Cash was not known for her voice per se. She was known for kind of the way she presented the songs. She the storytelling process. And by the way, I looked it up. Natalie Portman did study ballet when she was a child.
Hmm.
So she has a dance background. There are numerous times in that concert that I could point out that seemed awkward. That seems strange. That seems unnerving. That doesn't fit. I don't. And who's singing the songs? Is it Natalie Portman
Yeah,
singing the
it
songs?
is.
It is her. It
Yep.
is her. I mean, that to me, I mean, I understood that. I could see that. Madonna doesn't have the greatest voice, but the way she performs her songs is interesting to me. A lot of people don't have the best voice in the room. A lot of people aren't the most talented actors who become famous. They just have whatever it is that projects them into the stratosphere. I just thought Madonna's a great example. To me, somebody like Adele can really sing, you know, and not to compare people, not to say one is better than the other, but I'm pretty sure that Adele has a bigger range and has a different vocal quality that might be considered more talented than Madonna. I don't know. I don't know music enough, but one would say the range sounds different. But every single time I've ever seen a Madonna concert, I've never seen her live. I do want to see her live though. I've seen a lot of her concerts. They did, HBO puts on those concerts sometimes. And I watch it and I'm fascinated by how intriguing she is, like what she's chosen to do and the way she's presenting this song I've heard for 25 years. I've never seen it like that before. It's intriguing. And of course, she's got all the religious imagery and all of the stuff that, I mean, it's just, and all the sexual stuff. It's just crazy, but you can see the artistry in it. And when you watch it, you can go, okay, maybe not my thing. and maybe not the most talented person in the room, but I can see why people are paying $200 to see her because she's mind blowing. She's got whatever it is and she's presenting it. This movie would have been ultimately okay for me and maybe even much better if those last three or four songs had been intriguing to where I thought the ends justify the means. Literally, the end of this film justifies the rest of the means. I'm thinking that the director wanted you to believe it doesn't take much talent to become hugely famous, and that was the statement that he was making.
I could see that because it is awkward, that end, and it goes on for a while. It is weird, and it's not like it's the first thing that's weird in the movie. You're right. So it's kind of like a movie of awkward things. So I could see that. Let's talk about the end, and let's talk about earlier, which was Willem Dafoe saying at the very end. The last thing he says as the narrator in the movie is that when she was in the hospital bed with her sister when she was really young and recovering from the school shooting, she said that she had a dream and she made a deal with the devil to be famous, and that's what she agreed to, Robert Johnson style. You can take that as a literal thing that happened in the reality of this movie, or you can take it as just a dream, I guess. But since the narrator has kind of been like our factual, exposition conduit, then you would probably, I mean, I would take that as a real thing in this world. So what did you think about that? Did that color the way that you look back on that movie?
I couldn't remember it when you first mentioned it. So that's
There you go.
something. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I didn't remember that until you just mentioned it. I did think to, you know, you can openly admit I'm not normally the cynical one on this podcast. I'm just not. I mean, that has been delegated to you 5 years ago. It's just who you are. And I appreciate that because I can actually see the reason why you're cynical about certain things or why you immediately take on the cynical idea first because the world is it is easy to roll your eyes at the world. It is easy to be cynical because cynicism pretty much wraps up a lot of things. Like, really, that's what you're doing? Like, it doesn't make sense sometimes. The world doesn't. So, I don't know what it is that when we're doing a podcast and we don't connect on the film, and recently we haven't been really liking the same things, which is okay. I mean, that's just the way that it works. Actually, I'm kind of surprised for 5 years we've liked as many things together as we have liked. So one would say, being of two different backgrounds, which we've discussed a million times before, one would think we would be a, a lot different than similar. That said, when we're really different, we're different because I so feel like you at the end of this movie. It's so cynical what I'm getting ready to say. Really? She sold her soul to the devil. That's why all this just happened. They couldn't come up with a better way to end this movie. Now, that's not me naturally. That's just not who I am naturally. I just thought to myself, I thought it was just an scapegoat. I thought it was just, and I will say this, there are things that don't ring true to me when I first see them. And then I see them a couple years from now and I'm in a different place and I understand something different about myself and it might ring true then. And it could very well be something like this. I don't want to be cynical and say I doubt it, but I doubt it. But it could be that 5 years from now I could stumble on this movie and be like, what the hell was this? Most of the time I rewatch something and I go, yeah, that was really great. And I remember it being great, or that was not fulfilling. And I remember it not being fulfilling. I have a feeling this is going to fall into the latter category. That said, it could happen where I could have a mind opening experience that made me understand this film on a different level. But when he says that at the end of the film, I just thought it was sort of, I don't know, it just seemed kind of tagged on to make
Yeah.
it all make sense, you know? Maybe if things were more intriguing and there were justifications for that, like you could see her choosing to do the right thing, but she chooses to do the wrong thing because she sold her soul to the devil. If that's literally what happened, then throughout the film, then it would be justifiable at the end to say something like that. But
Mhm.
I also thought it was a bit tongue in cheek, like it wasn't for real, that this is a part of the pop legend and this is part of the mythos of this character Celeste, who's become, because we have the people that we create in our own image, or in the image we see on TV, but we don't really know them. We talked about that earlier on in the podcast. We don't really know how they act. And actually, when you see somebody in their home life, it's kind of strange. It's like when you see somebody who was famous, and then you see them light a cigarette, you're like, they smoke? It's just weird because you didn't know that about them. I don't know. I just think the ending is one of those ones that it could have been powerful if everything up to that point. So did that happen to you where you're like, yes, that's the answer?
No, 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 it did seem tacked on to me, and it seemed like it was not. I mean, it was one way to read that. I was also kind of thinking that there was going to be, the classic, cinema rule of threes, or storytelling rule of threes, I guess, where we had a school shooting at the beginning. There was the shooting in Croatia, actually, which I've been to, but there was a shooting on the beach in Croatia. And then I was expecting some sort of like event to happen at the concert, especially since she was back in Staten Island, back, kind of in her
And they
hometown,
allude to
quote
that
unquote,
too.
giving this concert. Yeah. And so I was kind of expecting something like that. And then that obviously didn't happen. And so I can't say that I was disappointed necessarily, but the fact that it just seemed like certain things were leading in a particular way. And then they just kind of like explain away some of the situation by using the narrator. And I think it was good to have the narrator in this movie because it gave it it gave it a kind of like an otherworldly feel, which I thought was kind of cool. And they brought the narrator in, obviously for exposition reasons, but also I think to set a tone, which I think Willem Dafoe did well, and the film did well in using Willem Dafoe. But by using him at the end like that, it did seem a little bit contrived. So I like this movie better than Destroyer, but like I said, it's not going to be on my top 10 list, or even close.
Not that we need to go into a long discussion, but I just realized the reason why they stopped at that beach is because of that mass shooting on the beach. That's why she wanted to pull over and pray for all of those people. I get that, but it just seemed
Oh
disingenuous.
yeah,
Right,
that
right.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
it just dawned on me that I didn't connect those two, but it just seems disingenuous that she doesn't really feel that stuff for real. Like she's just saying and doing that. It's like when she's like, "I love you, baby," when she's talking to her kid, she's like,
She's also high
"Yeah, totally."
when she's doing that.
I don't know. I've seen high people who are way more sincere than that. But my point to all that is that here's where the disconnection happens for me. If you take the mass shooting out of the film and you take the school shooting out of the film, would you need it? Would you need it for this film?
I think so. I think you do because it's showing how she got famous. She didn't get famous because she was an amazing singer. She got famous because she was a part of a cultural moment, and that was spun into fame.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That says something different than somebody coming out of nowhere hustling her CDs that she made in her bedroom playing guitar and singing. Totally different.
And the fact that she was one of the victims adds to that too.
Yes. So maybe she's got a little bit longer rope. Okay, maybe she doesn't sing that great. Maybe she can't dance really well, but she was a victim of the school shooting in wherever.
I just have the most cynical facial expression on my face. And I'm like, why am I feeling like that? Just like I didn't do anything for you in Destroyer, there's nothing in our conversation that made this make me go, oh, that's what I missed. Oh, that's what I should have gotten. Oh, I need to see this again.
I get it. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. Go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.